Wow. Well, thank you. Um, some of those things we'll talk about, and some of them we won't. Uh, I'll start by somebody asked me yesterday how I got into this business. And frankly, I went to school to be a pastor. Um, and I was serving at my first church as a children's pastor. And I started dating the pastor's wife, pastor's daughter. I'm gonna try that again. Started dating the pastor's daughter. I would really be in trouble, wouldn't I? Wound up marrying her, and that caused me to be the pastor's son-in-law, which meant that I got to do everything that nobody else wanted to do. And so immediately, or within a very short period of time, I'm running sound, I'm locking the doors, I'm cutting the grass, you know how it is. As the children's pastor, I was the first one to get volunteered to do anything and everything. So I got involved in the audio and just quickly began to learn how little the church knew about audio, video, and lighting. And so after a considerable amount of time, almost 10 years, doing that, I began to do it for other churches and help them and started a business. And now here we are almost 25 years later. We have 26 employees. We do projects all over the country, both very traditional and very, very modern, in churches all over the country. We've done a couple of projects overseas as mission endeavors and would love to do that. That's my favorite thing to do. But working with worship pastors is what we do every day. In the small to medium-sized church, which I would say is churches under 500 people, that seat less than 500 people. That's probably 75 or 80% of our clients. And those projects range from a few $100s to a few $100,000. A typical install in a brand new church that seats 500 is probably in that $150,000 to $200,000 range for that kind of church. And that's audio, that's video, that's lighting, whether it's projection or whether it's LED, simple sound with a couple of speakers and some in-ears and some microphones. Is typically, that's 80% of the projects that we do. So that just sort of gives you a profile of who we are and what we do. And what I want to talk to you today about is what it is most worship pastors need to know about ABL. And you just feel free at any point to raise your hand. You won't interrupt me and ask questions. That makes this probably more effective if you do that. Let me ask you a question. How many of you serve full-time at a church? Just raise your hand. So 1, 2 or 3. Okay.
Part-time.
Okay, part-time. That's fair. Okay, so that's most of us serve either part-time or full-time. Sorry. Yeah, just serve at a church. Are any of you just completely volunteer and it's not paid at all?
Yeah, several
more. Okay. Yep. Okay. So I serve volunteer at a church, in a pastoral role as well. And so I see that. And let me just tell you, we see you and you are the most important part of the church. Those who serve and lead every weekend. And I just want to tell you that I appreciate you and what you do. So let me ask you this. Well, before I go there, let me just say this. So we're going to just talk quickly about what you as a worship leader should know about ABL. And I just got a couple, like 3 bullet points. So number 1 is you need to know before anything else what's appropriate for your church. So I lived in the land of Andy Stanley in North Point Church. They're an hour from here. Most of you will know who they are. And you take churches like Seacoast, which is in Charleston, North Point, which is here just north of Atlanta in Alpharetta, North Coast in San Diego, Elevation Church. Those guys were the ones that sort of pioneered video church, very contemporary church. And so a lot of people, when I meet with them, say, and they'll name a church and they'll say, we want to be like them, whether it's Elevation or North Point or First Baptist Dallas or whoever. They'll say, we want to be like them. I would caution you that can not be appropriate. So the first thing you need to know is what is appropriate for your church, what is going to speak to them. I grew up independent Baptist, not only independent Baptist, but independent fundamental King James only Baptist. Okay. So picture that. Now, if I went into that church and I took drums into that church at that time, I'm immediately done. They don't want to hear from me, and it will be no time at all before I'm looking for a new job. And that's what will happen to you. So you need to understand what's appropriate for your church. Is my volume okay? Am I too loud?
Yep. Sounds great in the room.
Good. Okay. Because my children tell me all the time, Daddy, you're yelling. And I said, that just means I'm passionate. I'm excited about my subject. So understanding who your church is and what it is that they need in order to worship is probably the most critical function that you have as a worship leader. So once you know that, then you've got to start talking about basic rules. So does anybody know what the National Institute of Deafness says the first level of hearing damage, what the decibel level is for that? Anybody got an idea?
98.
Somebody want to guess? Throw me a decibel number out where you think hearing damage be.
If you have a guess, you probably heard Dr. Caston say it more than the rest of us. He's trying to remember. We have a voice professor that's like he's an evangelist for decibel.
I know Ben Caston.
I'm gonna guess 75.
Okay. Anybody else?
90 hertz.
90?
90 decibels, sorry.
90 decibels. So the National Institute of Deafness says it's at 85 decibels, but that's sustained. So you have to understand that is, if I hear that 8 hours a day for 40 years, 85 decibels, I'll experience some hearing deafness. So deafness is about how much. So we can be at 95 or 97 dB level for an hour every day for 40 years without experiencing any hearing loss. So what I would encourage you to know that in the 95 to 97 decibel range for an hour a day is okay. Now, there are online software devices that are admissible in court that will allow you to measure your decibel level. And so if you just Google that, you'll come up with a couple of them. I can't remember their names at the moment, but they'll tell you where your audio level is. So let me see. I wrote down what they were. A normal conversation is 60 to 70 decibel. 60 to 70 decibels. A movie theater is 74, anywhere from 74 to 104. A motorcycle, standing next to a motorcycle, is 80 to 110. And music through headphones at max volume is somewhere between 80 and 110, depending on what you're listening to. So if you've got your headphones cranked all the time, and you're listening to that 3 hours a day, you're experiencing hearing loss. So be careful with that. That's your tool. That's what you've got to use. And if you go deaf or you experience hearing loss, so I have a very high frequency hearing loss. I was in a church, Johns Creek Baptist Church here in Atlanta. I was running front of house. This is 20 years ago. And the worship pastor brings me down to the stage. He said, "Do you hear that frequency feedback right there?" And I said, "What frequency feedback?" And he said, "That going on right there." And I said, "No, I can't hear it." That's when I figured out that probably I was not going to be a good front of house operator. So I had that loss. Now I can find it because I knew what he was talking about and I knew where that loss was over time. So I can get that out for you. But once you had that loss, then you're going to have a harder time adjusting. So be very careful with your hearing and with other hearing. So know the basic rules for AVL, 95 to 97. You don't want to be over that. And that's, you can't have a conversation standing next to the guy next to you at 95. You'll be screaming at him in order for him to hear you. Okay? Then you need to understand signal flow. How does, as the worship leader, when there's a problem, how do you go figure out where the problem is? So you hold your microphone up and you speak into it and nothing happens. You need to understand signal flow. So the sound leaves your microphone as you speak. It goes into the microphone. It goes through the cable. The cable goes to the floor box or to the connector in the floor. Goes all the way to the soundboard, and from the soundboard it leaves, and it's now an out, and it's going to go through your amplifier, into your processor, and into your speakers. When does feedback happen? What causes feedback? Feedback is caused when this signal that I'm speaking into my microphone crosses itself. So when you take a microphone and you hold it in front of a floor monitor, you're going to get feedback, right? Most feedback comes from floor monitors on the stage. So that's why in-ears have become so popular over the last 10 years. So most contemporary modern worship bands are using in-ear monitors, as opposed to going on the floor. Do any of you use that? You have in-ear monitors, okay? About half the class? Awesome. That will stop most feedback. And so that's a tremendous asset to you, especially if you're doing more modern worship and you've got 8 or 10 people on stage, 4 or 5 singers, and, half a dozen band members as well. So in-ear monitors will make all the difference in the world for you. But understanding signal flow, what causes feedback, will make your life 1,000 times easier. Video, what do you need to know? So from a video standpoint, you need to understand software, because it is software that drives all of your worship sets and everything that your parishioners, that your church members see. And so ProPresenter is by far the most popular. I would say we put it in about 85 or 90% of the churches that we do. Even traditional churches are beginning to use ProPresenter and putting their songs up on the screen. Let me caution you to think carefully about what you put on the screen and how much. I've seen a lot of churches where they're putting the entire song on the screen at one time, and that can be very difficult to read. So we say typically 26 font is the minimum we use on the screen. So we want to be 26 or greater. We're usually using 1 or 2, at the most 3 lines of content on the screen at one time. So when you look at video, you have three choices. You have projection, you have televisions, and then you have LED. Projection is, TVs are going to be the least expensive. What really prohibits TVs is distance. Now, a 90-inch TV is now only $1,500. So they have gotten much, much more realistic for use in a small room. Now, when determining how your distance or how big your screen should be, so you want about 1/3. You want the height, and we get right up here. You want the height of the screen to be 1/3 of the distance of your best seat in the room. So if you're front, which is typically your first or second row, something like that, if you are from your screen to your first or second row is 45 feet, then you want the height of that screen to somewhere be between 12 and 15 feet high. Okay? You with me? So 1/3. That's for maximum viewing. Now, oftentimes the architecture doesn't allow that. So you have to be careful with that and make sure that the screens fit the room. Anything under, is anybody in a room that's less than 30 feet from the front to the back, all the way to the back? Nope. 50 or 60, somewhere in there, that range. I know we don't know exact rooms. Anybody in a room, let me try it different. Anybody in a room that's less than 300 seats? Okay. I would tell you a TV is probably the right answer for you in that, as a general rule, under 300 seats, we can put 80-inch screens, 90-inch screens in there, and they're going to get less expensive. But a 96-inch screen is $6,000 for 96. So past that 90-inch, it starts going up in price, way up. If you're going to do projection, if you're going to do projection, you need to stick to that 1/3 distance, 1/3 distance rule. Okay. So projection, you need to understand what foot candles is. Foot candles is the measurement of light on the screen. So when you go to, let me give you a tool that you're going to love. It's called projectorcentral.com. 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 That will help you understand all of the measurements, all of the screen sizes, all of the projector sizes that work in for your room when you're doing projection. It'll help you say, if you say, I have a 12-foot wide by 7-foot tall screen, what size projector? It'll help you determine what the best projector. You need to be an LCD TV. That's the old square TV that we all used to have. Okay. And I'm going way back. Some of you didn't have those. Some of you don't know what they are. But that's the old square tube TV that was as deep as it was wide. And about 27 inch was the biggest TV you could get. Okay, 27 inch. My monitor that I'm looking in right now is a 32-inch monitor on my desk. It's bigger than the TV that I grew up with. We used to have to go hold the antennas. I have 4 brothers. And we would want to watch wrestling on Saturday night as little boys. This was back in the 70s. We would have to go hold the antennas, and we would fight about whose turn it was to hold the 2 rabbit ear antennas. Well, fortunately, we don't live in that day and age anymore. And now we all have big TVs. And so, but that old TV was about 50-foot candles. Yeah. Is how brightness it was. Now, an LED TV that we all have now that we're looking at right now, an LED TV is at 100-foot candles. Okay. And A plasma TV, which we don't see anymore, plasma TVs are at about 75-foot candles. Okay? So if you want a projector to be as bright as a television that we have today, an LED TV, you need to be in that 100-foot candles range. Okay? I'm saying foot candles, it's foot Lamberts, pardon me, foot Lamberts. And so you want to be in that 100-foot candles range. So if you're going to, so TVs are always, majority of the time, going to be brighter than projection. So if you can get away with a TV because of the size of your room, that's what you want to do. It's the most cost-effective way to get it in. Plus, you're looking at true black. When you look at a TV, you're looking at a black TV. And so you get the brightness of colors, you get the great contrasting colors that you can't get with projection. With projection, you're typically looking at a white or a gray screen. You're looking at a reflection of light and not direct light. So projection is almost never going to be as good as a television. The third option, of course, is LED. Do any of you have LED in your spaces now? One of you. Okay, two of you, three of you. Cool. That's awesome. It's my favorite thing to do. I love to put LED in churches because all I have to do is set it up on stage and the pastor will walk in and go, I love that. And it's the easiest sell I've ever made in my life. We did a project just south of Atlanta, not far from here. And I said, I don't know, it was about 40 inches wide by 8 feet tall on the stage. I set it up. The pastor walked in the room and he said, I love it. And we made $1 million sale just like that. I'm thinking, this is what I like to do. And they use it. It's a 60-foot wide. It's similar to what First Baptist Dallas does. It's 60-foot wide. And if he's talking about being in Israel, he's walking on the road to Emmaus, and the road to Emmaus is behind him. And it's just stunning what he's been able to do. Now, that's not realistic for most of us. I'm in a church of about 750, so it's a little bit of a larger church, and we have some LED, but we don't have a 60-foot wide $1 million LED wall. Most of us, at best case, are going to get a couple of screens because of the brightness. Where LED really works in a more traditional setting, a lot of times we're in traditional rooms that have bright windows with sunlight shining directly in them, and the LED will overcome that sunlight. So that's a great way to put video in a church that has open windows without putting shades in the windows, without that kind of stuff. That works really well. So video, we talked about audio, we talked about video. Let's talk just briefly about lighting. So what you need to know is lighting is this. Number one, at the end of August, all conventional lighting has gone to LED in the U.S. So you can no longer buy, you're not supposed to be able to buy, they're no longer manufacturing it or importing it officially. You can still get it. Importing incandescent fixtures. You have to buy LED. So that's going to make a lot of the fixtures that we have in our sanctuaries invalid. You're going to have a hard time getting lamps, getting bulbs. So what's going to happen is, if you haven't already done it, you're going to start converting to LED bulbs or LED fixtures. Now, if you're converting to LED bulbs, what you're going to find is that when you put the bulb in there, they flicker. When you begin to dim them and turn them up and turn them down, they'll flicker, and you're going to hate that. And you got to buy the right kind of bulb that is flicker-free, that will work, or you have to go in and do some makeshift sort of, I'm from Kansas originally, So I call it cowboy engineering. You're going to have to cowboy engineer your dimming systems so that they will not realize that there's a significant voltage droppage. So you're gonna struggle with that, and what you got to do is call a company like mine and find out from the experience of Hard Knocks how to get around that. So at the end of this, I'll give you my information. You just want to keep us in your Rolodex. I know we don't have Rolodex anymore, but keep us in your phone and make sure that you have our number and you can call us and say, hey, I'm having this problem with my house lighting. So house lighting is a big thing that we're doing for lots of churches where we're converting them to LED. Your local power company has rebates and things like that. And I'm not here to sell. So that's not what we're doing. But you're going to run into that problem. Call us and let us help you get through that, whether we upgrade you or whether we just tell you how to engineer it on the backside to fix that. But you need to be somewhere. An accepted measure of light in your church is going to be in the 20-foot candle. That's the measure of light whereby you can hold your Bible underneath you and you can read it. Okay, if you don't have sight loss problems, that's 20-foot candles. On the stage, you always want your stage to be twice as bright as your house. So all the attention is directed from out here onto the stage. Now, in modern worship, we dim the houses. They're pretty much dark in most cases during worship, and that allows us to give lots of mood and lots of color and lots of effect on the stage. And so we do that with a combination of just static fixtures with fixtures where I can change all the color. Everything is LED now, so we're going to be limited by what we can get, so we'll all have to be LED as we move forward, so there'll be no more change in lamps. That all goes away, but the fixtures are more expensive. And those are the things that I think you ought to know very basically. Signal flow, volume, talked about video. We talked about video, which was televisions or projection or LED. We talked about lighting and basic foot candle measurements, house lighting versus LED versus incandescent. So let me just ask you this. What questions do you have? What are your challenges you're facing in your churches now?
I'll ask just regarding the LED screen situation. We recently had to replace one in our church because it dims over time. You can run it at a certain percentage of power, and we had been running it at full power, but after I guess 6 or so years, the brightness of it had declined pretty rapidly. Are you finding that the newer technology is just better than that? Like it's able to last a little longer, or have you had any experience with that?
So it really depends on what you bought at the beginning. I have an LED wall in Albuquerque, New Mexico that's been there 12 years. We're still very close to full brightness now. Even brightness on LED is measured in nits, N-I-T-S, and so you have to be careful to see what you buy. All LED is not built the same. So 10 years ago, they started importing very, very, very cheap LED. And so those don't operate as well as good because you get what you pay for. So we're finding that on those very inexpensive LED walls that we were replacing them. And I'm not going to get into brands and any of that, but the better LED walls will have a lot more nits or a lot more brightness than you would ever need. And so we're running ours probably in the 40% range in most cases because your camera can't even handle full brightness. And so I would tell you, when you select that, you want to be careful to look at nits. There's about 10 different measurements that you want to know when you look at it, because I'm working on a project right now in Oklahoma where the LED they're looking at is a third of the price of the one that I'm specifying. And they're like, well, why is that a third of the price? Well, because you're going to get moire, which is the waviness that happens in an LED. There's some settings in the LED to help to prevent that. And so you get that, you get a much decreased brightness. The longevity over time doesn't last. But most of the walls that I have put in are maintaining a brightness that is still completely adequate for the rooms. And we're 10 and 12 years out on some of those.
Cool. Thank you.
So it really goes to the quality of the LED that you put in first and understanding what the specs are on each one of those.
All right.
Anybody else?
Yep. Got a few.
Yeah. So with incandescents getting illegal, we're looking to replace our lighting systems. Do you recommend keeping a DMX system, or would you go with some of the newer wireless stuff?
So I tend to stay away from wireless where it's not absolutely necessary, because you just don't know what the FCC is going to do. So wired is always more dependable. And so if there's already a DMX system, there's no real advantage to going to wireless. If there's a reason, then that's fine. Then we'll do that. But in most cases, we're sticking with DMX or DMX, which is called ArtNet over Ethernet. Any one of those is fine. But we stay away from wireless unless there's a reason that you absolutely have to have it. That makes sense? Okay. Somebody else?
In my church,
Yes, sir.
we've used in-ears for years. And we've actually been using in-ears and floor monitors at the same time for the vocalists who are in front and not using their in-ears. So we're still having the noise problem, even though the band is all using in-ear monitors. And then in our youth room, in our youth band, we've just switched from floor monitors to in-ears to get rid of that noise entirely. So the singers are also using in-ear monitors and just not comfortable with it. It's kind of awkward to have that right in the front, to have their little Avion system right next to them. So should we just forget about the singers having in-ears and stick with the floors, or just go totally in-ear and make the singers get over it?
Well, that's a great question, and one I can't really answer for you, because it goes to those people and getting them comfortable in ears. One of the things that will help is if you put microphones out in the audience so they can get the feel of the room, because what really makes it uncomfortable is you feel sequestered when you've got microphones in or you've got monitors in your ears. And so getting them to feel the room by putting microphones out in the house will help alleviate some of that issues. But you will eliminate overwhelmingly most of feedback when you put them on the in-ears. So I would try to go to in-ears as much as possible. But it can be difficult with some people.
I would be one of those people, so I can sympathize with both one. Right.
Yep.
Question. So with using in-ears, how do you promote your hearing to not like lose it over time of using in-ears so often? Because I work with a musician, and he actually has lost part of his hearing in his left ear from just having in-ears in for so long. How do you just keep your ears hearing well with using in-ears for so long?
So with every system, you get some control, whether it's using an Avion, which we're sort of moving away from. You'll see Alan and Heath has a version called the ME series that's very similar to an Avion in the way it works. Most people are now putting it on your phone, and so you just got to keep that volume down. You can't. It's about sustained levels of volume, and so keeping that volume down below that 90 range And I don't know why you need it above that, unless you already had hearing loss, but just keeping that volume down. And then I would tell them pulling them out of your ears sometimes
So
as well.
this is something that I feel like the experiences I've had with this are different from my band members. I relate to things primarily as a singer, even though, you know, I'm playing or whatever. And my experience with other singers in church, now we've talked in a variety of classes. I've talked about how when you're talking with, when you're dealing with, when you're working with your singers at church or your players at church, it's like some people talk about how you might, if you have boys and girls like children, you may talk to your boys and girls differently. Like there are different rules at play. There are different rules to play with your singers and your players, because when you are talking to a player, you can say, you know, like basically there's a job to do and their instrument is their tool to accomplish their job.
Right.
When you're talking to a singer and you ask them to do something that is not currently happening, you are assaulting their identity and their soul. Like something about their singing. And so I know that a lot of those same singers, singers are always the problems with the monitors. It's never the player. It's always the singer. Because the singers are like, I can't hear myself. Turn me up. Get that bass lower. Get what, you know, and they're anyway. So then if you give them a tool by which they can, with no limits, make something as loud as they want to in their ear, they're going to do it. And they're going to go deaf. So what are some strategies we might have to try to help limit? Are there ways you can put limits on avioms or things like this, where they literally don't have ultimate control over volume?
Yeah, we can set limiters at the console to do that. So that's not an issue at all. We can control that volume and say it never gets above this level.
So some of us need to have conversations with our guys and ladies running board and say, you put the limit on this, and when they ask you for more, and it used to be louder, what's wrong with it? Just say, you know what, we'll look on that. We'll check on it. That's as loud as it can go. Yeah. You might need to have an unspoken rule with your tech board operator. Yep.
And you just use regular headphones instead of in-ear monitors. They don't isolate.
Yep. Yes, and then you look weird on the platform. Yeah.
I've also found, the volume issue is almost always a mixed issue. The singers are the ones who are trying to get everything into their ears when they don't actually need it. I mean, if your drums are acoustic, you can hear them with one ear out. I've been using in-ears for, I guess, 15 years now. I've exclusively done one ear in and one ear out. I relate to it as a singer primarily as well, and that gives me enough of a sense of the room. But I also have to discipline myself to only put in the one ear that's in what I need, whether it's like a click track or enough rhythm to keep me in time with everyone else, maybe the main leader or one other instrument. You just don't need everything. The singer, anyone on the stage doesn't actually need a professional quality mix.
Right. Yes.
Okay, follow up, Jeremy.
Oh, what are they switching to away from ABM? We're moving away from that. Where's that?
We're moving more to in-ear, and then I'm using software. So with Advantis, I can just put it with Advantis on Allen Heath or whatever console you're on, and you're putting in ears. You can mix them on your phone or on an iPad, or in many cases, we're putting an iPad on stage, and there's somebody walking around from person to person saying, what do you need? What can I do for you? Do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want that? Instead of everybody having a mix station in front of them, I'm putting basically a console engineer who's walking around helping everybody, or everybody's got it on their phone.
I like that. Yeah. Well,
Yeah, there was like, this question is about what Jonathan was saying. Jonathan, sorry. It's about what is your recommendation? Because sometimes when I'm playing, at church, I like to have the headphones because they don't block the whole ear, because sometimes I feel with in-ears, like I'm underwater, like that pressure you said.
Yep.
So I don't like that, but I know it's necessary because the in-ears are to just to quiet the outside so you can hear everything in the inside super clear. And I love that. But also I like the idea of having headphones because they are like, I don't feel that pressure on my ears, but sometimes I have to go louder because the outside sound will come, like into my ears. So what will be the best? Like to wear, I really don't care how I look, like Dr. Brown was saying. If that's gonna help my ears, then I prefer to use headphones. But what's the best?
I think it's all about your level of comfort. 100%. It's about your level of comfort and making sure that you can play and do the job that you need to do. So if it's headphones, use headphones. If it's in ears, use in ears.
Right. To tag on to what he was saying. So I've heard from some people, because like for my in-ears, they're 5 drivers. They're like classic Amazon, they get the job done. But I know like for professionals, they start going into the custom in-ear molds. Do you recommend that at a certain point if you're playing songs? I know some of those like will isolate the whole canal, so only the in-ears go in. Like what point do you go that route? Because for me, I'm gonna stick with my cheap 5 drivers because they get the job done. But at what points do you think that's wise?
And I really think it's a matter of personal preference. It's whatever you need to do the job. There's no set hard line that we can draw.
What is the name of because I know Aviums are what I used at my last full-time church before I came here. So
So there's really 2 out there right now.
You just use your own headphones and it's running through your phone. What is that software?
Everybody, all the board manufacturers have them now. So Avant, Allen and Heath has them. Digico has them. Whoever you use has the ability to do that because everything's sitting on the network now. So we're just putting a network switch in the room and your phone is attaching to that, and there's a software through an app that you use on your phone. So it really is Behringer. Probably several of you probably have a Behringer console, and they have their own proprietary software that works with it. There is sort of a Klang, it's spelled Klang, and they have immersive, so you can tell, I want the drums to come from here, I want the guitar to come from here, I want voices to come from here. That's a very high-end level that you'll see only in the very largest of churches. So we've done some of that as well.
Jesse?
But whoever your console is going to be the answer to that.
So, what if you've got a situation where the power doesn't go out, but the internet goes out? What would you do then? Because in that case, everybody's stuff would just go kaput.
Yeah, if your internet's going out, you're losing everything that sets on the network. So your control of your in-ears is going to go away. So in that case, you're going to need a hardwired, whether it's Klang or ME. Allen Heath has the ME series that has a hard mixer that sits there, or Avion. So that's all about just trying to get better internet. And I know I live out in the country, so no, for a very long time, my children thought I was depriving them because, we were still on DSL until just recently.
Any more questions?
I have a
Okay.
What's the best way to avoid feedback? You said that eliminating the front monitor is the best way, but if you have to keep your monitor in your sanctuary, then what's the best way to control the feedback?
Then feedback happens when the signal crosses itself. So if you've got to have monitors on stage, which I understand that, then you've got to you need to get with your mix engineer and find the frequencies that easily feed back and tune that channel based upon that feedback. And try to keep as much volume. Choirs should not have a lot of their voice coming back through the choir monitors. Now, they don't want to hear that. They want, and the less confident they are with their singing, the more they want to hear themselves. But when they hear themselves, you are upping the chances, increasing the chances for feedback. So you need to fight them on that, or you're going to have feedback. So spending time prior to live worship, mixing and getting them EQ'd the very best you can is the answer to that.
Practicing in the service venue also helps their lack of confidence.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of us it's easy to build a choir room that is acoustically optimal. And they rehearse there. And then they go in, and out of nowhere, they can't hear anything. And you all have been those singers. So, yeah, I think even just practicing there not only helps to set up, but, get used to it. What, Chloe, were you trying to say? I couldn't tell if you were raising your hand or not. All right. All right. Jim?
Anybody else?
Jim, we're grateful for you, brother. This is awesome. When you were here last, did you get to visit? Did Joe introduce you to Jim Bob Brown? No relation to me, but
No, sir. I don't believe so.
He's our main event media person, and he teaches the two required classes. One focuses more on live sound, the other focuses more on the video aspect. But we're just so grateful for you and for people like Jim Bob, because musician, but one thing about Jim that is worth reiterating to the class, he started out one way in ministry, and he just remains open to what God has for him. You're doing something that when you were 20 years old, this is not what you expected to be doing.
No, not even remote.
But I would just hesitate. I would not hesitate to guess that you would say the lines have fallen in pleasant places, as the psalm says. So you know what? He's serving the Lord, and he's doing real, real good. And so I think that's just a general word for us. All right. So
I don't know. Let's see. There we go. You can't see it, but that's okay. Go to Messenger if you want to know who we are. Write this down: messengeravl.com. And we'd love to help you any way we can, even if it's just give you advice on the phone. If you need a sympathetic ear, we can do that. We do a lot of that. messengeravl.com.